This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
Hello, welcome to Hidden History and Odyssey Through Time. I'm your host, John Rodriguez, and this is episode 21 of the Best History podcast north of New York City. The title of this episode is From a Name to a Number, the Narrative of Alter Wiener. Before we begin, we here at Hidden History would like to give a quick shout out to the podcast of the month of July over at the Deluxe Edition Network, our podcast network. The two podcasts are called Growing Up Bananas and IAP Radio. Growing Up Bananas is a podcast that gives you a glimpse into the puzzling lives of Asians in Australia, while IAP Radio is a podcast dedicated to the less glamorous side of sports. You can find these great podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, and don't forget to follow them on Instagram. Thanks for listening, and now let's get to the episode. When Alter Wiener relocated to Hillsboro, Oregon in the year 2000, the Oregon Holocaust Resource Center asked Alter to share his story. A Holocaust survivor who had never spoken in public before, Alter hesitated at first because of his Polish accent and limited vocabulary, but decided to give it a chance. Between 2000 and 2018, Alter had a chance to speak to thousands of people and received thousands of letters from those who heard his story. After listening to Alter speak, it's hard not to be grateful and forever thankful that we here in the United States have been spared such an experience. Alter had no idea that when he shared his story with the world, he would have such a positive impact on his audiences. His hope had been to simply inspire those listening to his story or reading his autobiography to combat racism and prejudice whenever it appeared and with whomever it threatened. As Alter explains in his book, quote, "The Holocaust was indeed a Jewish tragedy, but also a tragedy for the entire civilized world to let it happen. An indelible human shame." Alter's story, hidden history that has remained long forgotten, is the story of a young Jewish man who made it through the Nazi flames of hell and later used tragedy to teach individuals and societies the true meaning of love and forgiveness. Abraham Alter Wiener was born on October 8, 1926 in Szanów, Poland, to Mordecai and Pearl Wiener. As a young boy, Alter was given the nickname Altus, and after World War II, he decided to just go by Alter, leaving out the name Abraham. In January 1931, Alter's mother Pearl suddenly died from some sort of heart issue. Shortly after Pearl's death, Alter's father got remarried to a woman named Rachel, who treated Alter and his older brother Samuel as if they were her own children. Rachel later gave birth to a son whose name was Hirsch, and in Alter's own words, quote, "She cared for the three of us with equal devotion." Alter's father, Mordecai, was a very pious man who prayed 3 times a day and observed every aspect of his Jewish faith with unwavering devotion. Mordecai was also devoted to his family, once saying, quote, "A man who does not care for his own family is worse than an unbeliever in God." Alter's father worked long hours to provide for his wife and 3 sons and make sure they all had a decent life. He had his own store, which was located in the front of the lower level of the building the Wiener family lived in. Mordecai also owned the building itself, which had been in his family for generations. However, One lesson that Mordecai drilled into the growing minds of his sons was that the real possession of man is not what he owns, but what he knows. Mordecai was very involved in the education of his children, and this included both their public education and their studies at Keter, a school that taught the basics of Judaism and the Hebrew language. Alter later had the following to say about his father in his autobiography, From a Name to a Number. Quote, "Every Saturday he asked me to give him a full account of my studies, in public school, in Keter, and my homework. He touted my achievements, and when I brought home a good report card, I was rewarded with a chocolate bar." Overall, Alter had a good life as a child, with food on the table and a roof over his head, and parents who cared for him. He had an older brother who could watch over him when needed, and he had a younger brother to pass down wisdom to. This would forever change, however, on September 11, 1939, with the murder of Mordecai Wiener by soldiers of the German army. The terrible reality of World War II came crashing down on young Alter's life, and nothing would ever be the same again. German troops invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, triggering World War II. In response to German aggression, Great Britain and France declared war on Nazi Germany 2 days later, on September 3, 1939. Nazi Germany possessed overwhelming military superiority over Poland, and so one goal of this invasion was to demonstrate Germany's ability to combine air power and armor in a new kind of mobile warfare. On September 17, 1939, the Soviet Union, a German ally, invaded eastern Poland, sealing Poland's fate. After heavy shelling and bombing, Warsaw officially surrendered to the Germans on September 28, 1939. In accordance with the secret protocol to their non-aggression pact, Germany and the Soviet Union divided Poland on September 29, 1939, with Germany in control of Polish land west of the Bug River. When Germany invaded Poland, Alter and his family watched as panic struck their small town, since it was very close to the border between Germany and Poland. German warplanes could be seen in the sky as residents tried to flee into the countryside of Poland and away from the invading army. Alter watched as long caravans of horse-drawn wagons, jammed with people and their belongings, rolled through his town, with chaos, confusion, and dark rumors swirling throughout the country. A man of action, Alter's father, Mordecai, hired a Polish coachman with the horse-drawn carriage in order for his wife and sons to escape, since very few trucks or cars were available at that time, and most trains had stopped running. Mordecai had to remain behind. The retreating Polish army had ordered him to stay in Szanów to provide the soldiers with provisions from his grocery business. Alter and the rest of his family lived for several days and nights in that horse-drawn carriage as they tried to escape the oncoming Germans. They were away from their home until November 1939, when they returned to their small town to discover their home and grocery business had been looted, all business records were gone, and Mordecai was nowhere to be found. That same month, Rachel, Alter's stepmother, was informed by the Judenrat, the Jewish Community Council, that in the town of Trebizond, a 10-minute car ride from Szanów, there was a pit of unidentified bodies. On September 11, 1939, Mordecai Wiener and 37 others were randomly picked up by the Germans and shot. Mordecai was left to bleed to death. One person managed to survive and escape during the night, and the remaining 37 victims were thrown into a pit to be forgotten for all time. Why did the Germans kill these innocent civilians? To spread fear, panic, and subjugation among the Polish population, especially the Jewish residents. The German commander of the local police agreed to allow the pit to be opened and the bodies to be given a proper burial, but this was not an act of kindness. The commander agreed to this because Polish people living in the neighborhood of the pit had been complaining about the smell of the decomposing bodies. Rachel Wiener had to be present to identify the body of her husband, not only for closure, but because the local Jewish council made it a requirement that wives identify their husbands' bodies in order to remarry in the future. 13-year-old Alter Wiener watched his stepmother collapse when she identified her husband's body. There was no medical examiner or coroner present, and no DNA existed in those days, so Rachel managed to identify Mordecai by certain familiar items that she found in his clothing. Alter would forever be haunted by flashbacks and nightmares of that day. To see a parent murdered in such a way, body decomposing and unidentifiable, is a sight that no child should ever have to bear witness to. Quote, "Daddy, why did they kill you? What have you done to deserve such a terrible punishment? Is it a crime to be a Jew?" Although Mordecai was gone, Rachel did her very best to make sure that her 3 sons were cared for. However, life in Scharnhorst under German occupation was becoming harder with each passing day, especially for the Jews. Soon it was forbidden for Jews to attend school, to travel, to gather, to visit parks, playgrounds, cinemas, or theaters. Many Jewish businesses were confiscated or Aryanized, and the few who were wealthy before World War II now joined the many poor and becoming destitute. In March 1940, Alter was shoveling snow in front of his house when a German policeman happened to walk by. Alter forgot to remove his hat as the officer passed, and although he apologized, he was beaten nonetheless. 2 months later, in May 1940, several priests and members of the Polish intelligentsia, scholars, academics, teachers, journalists, and literary writers, along with Catholic clergy, were executed in Alter's town. By that time, according to Alter, 38 priests had been executed and hundreds of clerics imprisoned. These numbers were reported to Pope Pius XII by Cardinal August Holland, a Polish high-ranking archbishop of the Roman Catholic Church. Alter had the following to say about life at this time. Quote, "The persecution aimed at the Jewish community brought vulnerability and dysfunction. Very few Jewish women gave birth. Many children were inflicted with rickets due to an inadequate intake of vitamin D. We all withered on meager food rations. Jews had to wear an armband with the blue Star of David. Later, it changed to a yellow Star of David." In 1941, 14-year-old Alter was forced by the Germans to serve the German war machine by working for an enterprise. He performed various manual chores, from shelving materials to rendering parts to cleaning and whatever else he was told to do. Most of you listening can probably already guess that Alter was not paid for his work. 57 years later, in June 1998, however, monthly pensions from the German government began arriving for Alter for his uncompensated work in 1941. Imagine that, huh? By June 1941, the Germans had come for Alter's older brother Samuel, grabbing him in the middle of the night from his home. He was not seen again. In January 1942, all Jewish residents were ordered to surrender their fur and jewelry to the Judenrat, or Jewish Committee. The valuables collected were later delivered to the Germans, who got the Jewish leaders of the Judenrat to cooperate with them by using threats and deceitful promises. In February 1942, 3 members of the Judenrat were beaten and sent to Auschwitz, where they perished. And in May 1942, the Germans hanged 7 Jews of the community on trumped-up charges. All Jewish residents of Scharnhorst were forced to watch the execution in horror, including Alter, while the German spectators, including some Polish residents, watched the hanging with delight. 1 month after the 7 Jews were publicly hanged, in June 1942, the Germans came for 15-year-old Alter. Listen as Alter himself describes what happened that night in June.
In June 1942, in the middle of the night, the Germans busted into our apartment. They looked at me. They didn't ask my age. They just told me in the German language, You have 3 minutes to get ready. My stepmother pleaded with the German. He's such a young boy. He's 15 years old. He needs a mother. I love that boy. Have mercy. What did the Germans do? They slapped on her face. You dare to question our action? And they took me away. I never had a chance to say goodbye to my stepmother and to my younger brother.
Before we continue with Alter's story, I would like to let you know what happened to his stepmother Rachel and half-brother Hirsch. On February 18, 1943, the Germans sealed the town and summoned all the remaining Jews of Scharnhof into the town square, including Rachel and her 9-year-old son. Everyone present was deported to Auschwitz, where they perished. At that time, the town became Judenrein, or clean of Jews, and that is exactly what the Nazis wanted. Back to June 1942, Alter was taken from his home by the Germans and shoved into a police van with other young, despairing Jews. From the van to the railroad station, Alter and almost 100 other Jews were stuffed into a cattle car without food and water. If one man died during the trip, he remained standing because there was no room in the cattle car for him to fall. After a horrible journey, Alter and the other captives arrived in Blechhammer forced labor camp in German-occupied Poland, which was about 47 miles from Auschwitz. Upon arrival, Alter was welcomed with a blow to the face for not moving fast enough. On his second day at Blechhammer, however, Alter was delighted and shocked to discover that his older brother Samuel, who had been taken by the Germans in June 1941, was alive and at the camp. The brothers remained together at this forced labor camp until October 1942, when Alter was transferred to another forced labor camp called Brande. This time, he would never see his brother again. The two were separated on Alter's 16th birthday. Brande, or Brand, was a small camp for about 800 Jews. Like Blechhammer, Brande had poor living quarters, barely any food, with termites crawling throughout the barracks. It was a very harsh winter for the Jews imprisoned at Brande, especially since they did not have any warm clothes and some people died of exposure. At this camp, Alter and the other Jews were forced to build the Reichsautobahn, or major highway, which was designed to run across Germany. The prisoners were marched to and from the working site for several miles, and Alter eventually suffered from frostbite. He was lucky, however, since some Jews died from hypothermia. After 2 months, in December 1942, Alter was sent to another camp within German-occupied Poland called Gross Mazowitz. There he worked in military warehouses above and below ground, at a site not far from the camp. Any item collected on the battlefront, such as uniforms of German casualties or enemies, their personal belongings, and their guns, reached Gross Mazowitz rail terminal. Alter's job, along with the other Jews, was to unload the train cars, assort, repair, clean, and shelve all those items in warehouses. In July 1943, the Germans converted a textile factory into a warehouse for the production of armaments and ammunition. The German employees of the textile business, mainly women, worked in one section of the factory, while the Jewish inmates were stationed in another part of the factory, dismantling old machines and putting up new ones. Alter was forced to work in this factory, and one day he was shocked when a middle-aged, dark-haired German woman made eye contact with him and pointed her finger towards a box. Alter was very curious to see what was under the box, but he also knew that if he was caught by a guard, his life would be over, literally. Listen to Alter explain what happened next.
Eventually, I did find the right moment, and what happened? I found a sandwich of 2 slices of white bread with a slice of cheese underneath a box. That German woman repeated that noble act of leaving a sandwich for me every day for 30 days, as long as I work at that location. I have no yardstick to measure to what extent it helped me to survive, because this was only for 30 days out of 1,050 days that I was incarcerated. But the question here is, why did she do it? Why? She heard on the radio and she read in the paper every day that I am an Untermensch, subhuman, and she is a master race, superior. Why was she willing to risk her life 30 times for a young Jewish boy? What comes to your mind? I'll tell you what comes to my mind. Maybe she had a son at my age and she felt sorry for me. Maybe she was a religious person and she tried to abide by the tenets of her faith to help somebody in need. Maybe she wanted to make a point that not all the Germans were so cruel. I don't know. I never will.
For as long as Alter worked in that textile factory, which was 30 days, that German woman brought him a sandwich each day. This act of kindness changed Alter's perception of German people as a whole. Quote, "Her extended hand led me to believe that I had no justification to hate each and every German for murdering hundreds of close and distant relatives of mine, as well as millions of others. It would be unjust of me to slap a noxious label on the entire German nation. There are good and evil people in each ethnicity. I recognize that there were indeed Germans who had refused to commit atrocities." After everything Alter had experienced because of Hitler and Nazi Germany, it's easy to understand why he would feel hatred towards the German population. After all, it was the German people who ultimately gave Hitler and the Nazi Party their power. And just several months before, a German guard had knocked out Alter's teeth just because he could. This German woman, however, who risked her life to help a Jewish boy have a meal, would stand out in Alter's memory for the rest of his life. She helped to shape his philosophical evolution, as well as the way he acted and interacted with others ever since. In March 1944, Alter was transferred to the Klettendorf labor camp. He remained there until September 1944, when he was then transferred to the Waldenberg concentration camp in German-occupied Poland. This camp of about 600 Jewish prisoners wasn't guarded by German soldiers like all the other camps Alter had been imprisoned in. This camp was guarded by the SS, a Nazi paramilitary organization. The SS saw themselves as the ultimate defenders of the Aryan race and Nazi ideology. They terrorized and aimed to destroy any person or group that threatened this. What also made this camp different was that it was here that Alter Wiener went from a name to a number, 64735, which was attached to his cap, jacket, and overcoat. During the Holocaust, concentration camp prisoners received tattoos only at one location, the Auschwitz concentration camp complex. By February 1945, 18-year-old Alter was very weak, in despair, and downhearted. He had no way of knowing that Nazi Germany would soon be defeated by the United States and the Allies, and suicidal thoughts entered his mind. Alter had every intention of grabbing the electrified fence surrounding the concentration camp and putting an end to his misery, but he didn't. In that moment he hesitated, thinking of a phrase in his prayer book which read, quote, "God in heaven decides whether a person should live or die." While the suicidal feelings remained with Alter for a long time, the strong roots of his Jewish faith did not allow his tree of life to fall. In March 1945, Alter was so weak and unwell that he could no longer work. The Jewish inmates were used to serve the German might, and when they could no longer work due to sickness or extreme physical weakness, they were transferred to a death camp to be murdered and cremated. Although Waldenberg concentration camp was a cruel place, It did not have gas chambers, and so Alter was transferred to a camp that had a crematorium. As he was waiting in line to be murdered, a German approached Alter and told him to get out of the line, that he was still fit to work. Alter was sent back to Waldenburg, where the Nazis wanted him to work until he died. On May 9th, 1945, Alter and the other Jewish inmates gathered for roll call, but no German guards arrived. Even the guards in the watchtowers around the camp had disappeared. Around 1 p.m., someone threw the key of the main gate to the group of inmates, and soon after, a Russian tank approached the gate of Waldenburg. A Russian officer announced in Yiddish, quote, "Jews, you are free. We are giving you 3 days of absolute freedom to rape, to steal, and even to kill Germans who tortured you. We have full empathy for your suffering because we have lost 22 million of our people, and tens of thousands of our villages and towns were wiped out." Alter Wiener, number 64735, was not interested in rape, stealing, or murder. He was only interested in freedom, which he finally had.
I didn't go out to kill. It's not ingrained in me. I could hardly walk. I had a very, very tough time. I didn't know what to do with my freedom. Where do I go? Where do I take strength to walk? Eventually, a German family who lived in that vicinity came to our camp, and one of them offered me to stay in her house until I regained some strength, and that's what I did. And when I did regain some strength, I went back to Poland to see if somebody of my family survived. On those days we had no computers. Even Red Cross couldn't provide you with reliable information, who survived, who did not survive. So I went back to Poland. I did stay in Poland for a few weeks, and only 4 cousins of mine did show up, and 123 members of my extended family, my grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, they were all murdered. I'm the only survivor of my immediate family.
In May 1945, when 18-year-old Alter was freed from the concentration camp by the Russians, he weighed only 80 pounds, was in poor health, and had no strength. During the summer of 1945, Alter managed to return to his hometown in Poland, but there was nothing there for him. His entire family had perished during the Holocaust. Alter thought of settling down in his hometown, but painful memories surrounded him wherever he went, and many of the Polish residents were hostile towards him. So Alter decided to move on, but before he left, he needed money. Before they were deported, family members had buried jewelry in certain locations, and so Alter and 2 surviving cousins found the buried jewelry, split it among the 3 of them, and Alter moved on to the city of Krakow. In Krakow, Alter roamed the streets and met survivors who told him that the American Jewish Distribution Committee was providing survivors with temporary shelter in a rented community hall. When he arrived at the hall, Alter was shocked but delighted to discover his cousin Francis had survived. That meant that 4 cousins of Alter's extended family had survived the Holocaust. From Krakow, Alter traveled to the Polish cities of Katowice and Sosnowiec before leaving Poland for Czechoslovakia. Alter's goal was to reach the promised land of Palestine, and from Czechoslovakia he traveled to Austria. In December 1945, the group Alter was traveling with moved on to the Italian border, and in January 1946, soldiers of the Palestine Hebrew Brigades, Palestinian Jews who volunteered to serve in the British forces as distinguished fighting units, drove Alter and his group of refugees in covered trucks to Italy. While staying in Italy, Alter grew very close to a 20-year-old Ukrainian girl in his group named Rivkael. Like Alter, Rivkael had been a victim of the Nazis and lost her family as a result of the Holocaust. Rivkael's brain, her warm heart, her common sense, and her friendly banter lifted Alter's spirit. By the end of May 1946, Alter and the others were ordered to destroy any personal documents that might reveal their refugee status. The British authorities had not given the refugees permission to sail to Palestine, but that was exactly what they were going to do. 1,300 people were loaded onto a ship at an undisclosed shore in Italy, including 19-year-old Alter, and they set sail for Palestine. As the ship approached Haifa, which was part of Palestine at the time, the captain told the exhausted refugees, quote, "If the British catch our ship and expel us from the shores of Palestine, I will sink the ship with all the people on it." Luckily for everyone on board, the ship was escorted to the port by 3 British warships and everyone was safe. However, they were all under arrest for illegally entering Palestine. Alter and the others were locked up in an internment camp for refugees just outside the city of Haifa. Alter remained there for 10 days until he was released on July 7, 1946, and because he had nowhere to go, officials from the Jewish Agency of Palestine sent Alter to a kibbutz, a collective community where people voluntarily live and work together. 3 weeks after settling in the kibbutz, Alter took a trip to the city of Tel Aviv, where he met a woman named Ronit. The two got involved in a relationship for 2 months, until Ronit met a 30-year-old lawyer with less baggage than Alter. Ronit would go on to marry that lawyer, and Alter wished him nothing but the best. Soon after, Alter's uncle, his mother's brother, discovered that Alter was alive and living in the kibbutz. The uncle had moved to Palestine in the 1930s to escape poverty in Poland. He found his nephew and brought him to stay in his home with his wife and 2 young daughters. The home was small and money was tight, but Alter was just happy to be around family. And while in Palestine, Alter discovered that 2 more cousins had survived, Dina and Anne, bringing the number of cousins who survived up to 6. On May 15, 1948, the State of Israel was proclaimed, and Alter was enlisted into the new Israeli military. Classified as unfit to serve in a fighting unit, Alter was placed in an administrative unit where he ran errands at the base headquarters. In May 1949, Alter was reunited with a woman named Deborah, who he had first met in Austria while traveling to Palestine. The two went out several times and fell deeply in love, but at the time Alter was not ready to get married and that relationship ended. In June 1949, 22-year-old Alter was released from the military and returned to the clerical job he had before his service, although the work did not satisfy his intellectual needs. 2 years later, in March 1951, Alter met Esther, and the two seemed to have a lot in common. Her family was also from Poland, and Esther had lost relatives during the Holocaust like Alter and so many others. The two fell in love, but were from different worlds. Esther was born in Palestine, was educated, and had family and friends. Alter was the opposite. He had seen true horror, had felt true pain. He had no family and friends, no future in sight. There were signs that Alter should not have got married to Esther. Quote, "I was very reluctant to get married, but I did. I did not make the right decision, but I tried for years to make the decision right." On March 19, 1952, Alter and Esther got married, and despite her good intentions, at least according to Alter, Esther did not keep her promises. She was simply unable to deliver the emotional support that Alter desperately needed. For example, Alter pleaded with Esther not to raise her voice and shout, since it triggered traumatic memories of the camps he was imprisoned in during the war, but Esther was insensitive to Alter's past, and this truly hurt him. Esther also had no problem telling her friends about Alter's shortcomings, and whether she was right or not, this drilled into the core of Alter's self-esteem. For too long he had been made to believe he was inferior, and he didn't expect that kind of behavior from his wife, the person who was supposed to love him unconditionally. In 1953, Alter applied at the U.S. consulate for a visa, with a cousin in the U.S. sponsoring him. Alter's doctor had recommended that it would be psychologically helpful to leave Israel and reside, at least for several years, in a country free of conflict or social upheaval. On October 9th, 1956, the day after Alter's 30th birthday, his first child with Esther, a son named Mordecai, was born. After 7 years of waiting, in 1960, Alter received a letter that his visa application had been approved. Because he had to leave within a certain time frame, Alter left for the United States on September 27, 1960, on board the Israeli ship Zion. Esther preferred to wait and see how Alter would manage in the U.S. Alter arrived in New York on October 10, 1960, and stayed with his cousin Benny and his wife for several weeks until his wife and son arrived. Alter and his family then moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, and Alter began attending school in the evenings. He received his diploma from elementary school in May 1961 and his high school diploma in 1962. In August 1962, always on the lookout for a better paying and more intellectually stimulating job, Alter began working at Birnbaum Bros. Inc. as a bookkeeper. This job allowed Alter to provide for his family, and he got along well with his employers, so much so that Alter remained with the company for about 20 years. In 1964, Alter and Esther welcomed their second child, Ron, into the world. Both of Alter's sons, Mordecai and Ron, like many of their generation, thought they were culturally superior to their father's generation. They did not want to hear about the past or the Holocaust. They simply had no interest. This broke Alter's heart, but he loved his sons very much, no matter how many times they disrespected him. On March 1st, 1966, Alter became an American citizen, an important milestone in his life. It was then that Alter's son changed his name from Mordecai to Martin, an easier name for the boy to spell and pronounce. Of course, this must have crushed Alter, since Mordecai was his father's name, but all he could do was stand by, smile, and approve. In 1969, Esther took the children to Israel to help care for her aging and sickly parents. Alter had no objection because he believed it was her moral duty. The couple also hoped that a temporary separation would be beneficial to both of them. In June 1970, Esther rejoined Alter in the U.S., but between 1961 and 1982, she made 22 trips to Israel until both of her parents passed away. From June 1980 until July 1981, Alter was the controller for Isram Travel after leaving his job at Birnbaum Bros. Inc. In 1982, Esther was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and had to be placed in a nursing home. Meanwhile, 54-year-old Alter began working at Rafaela Sportswear Inc. as a controller until his retirement in April 2000. It was then that Alter decided to move to Hillsboro, Oregon. By the year 2000, Alter's son Ron had been living in Oregon for 10 years and wanted his parents to move out there too, promising to be helpful and supportive with Esther's progressive disease. Alter was against the move from New York to Oregon, but Esther decided she wanted to go, and Esther always got her way. After their move to Hillsboro, Alter was approached by the Oregon Holocaust Resource Center, who asked him to share his story. He hesitated at first because of his limited vocabulary and his Polish accent, but decided to give it a chance. Alter gave his first presentation at Century High School on November 27, 2000 in Hillsboro, Oregon. He eventually shared his story hundreds of times with nearly 1,000 audiences at schools, universities, libraries, churches, book clubs, prisons, and community organizations. Alter also received thousands of letters from those who heard him speak, and he shared quite a few of those letters in his autobiography, From a Name to a Number, a Holocaust survivor's autobiography. I have also included a few letters written to Alter on our website, hiddenhistorypod.com. And while I'm on the subject of Alter's autobiography, he released his book in 2008 to help people truly understand the horrors of the Holocaust and give readers a chance to empathize with Holocaust victims and survivors, many of whom were put into situations that is impossible to imagine. Alter spent the rest of his years inspiring hope and gratitude. He said he felt, quote, a moral obligation to share his story with as many people as possible, so that no one would forget the tragedies of the Holocaust. In September 2018, Alter told his story to Oregon legislators, appearing before a committee on behalf of a bill that would require education about the Holocaust and genocide in Oregon schools. On December 5th, 2018, Alter gave his final presentation at Lake Ridge High School in Oregon. His presentations helped educate many thousands of Oregon residents about the horrors of the Holocaust, and also inspired his listeners to never lose hope and to have love for our fellow human beings. On December 11th, 2018, 92-year-old Abraham Alter Wiener was struck and killed by a car while crossing a street near his home in Hillsboro, Oregon. It was a dark and rainy night, and the driver of the car did not see Alter and was not charged or cited. Alter was pronounced dead at the hospital and was buried in Portland, Oregon. At the time of his death, Alter's wife Esther had already passed, and he was survived by his 2 sons, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. With so few Holocaust survivors left, we're especially sorry to have lost Alter, a man who was as important to the world as he was to Hillsboro, Oregon. I will end this episode with a quote by Alter about freedom, and I think he would approve. Quote, I shall forever be grateful to the U.S. for enabling me to live in this land of freedom and opportunity. The U.S. is still the beacon of pluralism and tolerance. I celebrate the 4th of July, Independence Day, every day. During the Holocaust, I had the freedom to die but not to live. The liberty granted to me in this country is the antidote of everything I was deprived of in my teens. All decent people are worthy to live in freedom. Let the bells of freedom ring. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have learned something new today. Season 2 of Hidden History is focused on the lives of victims and heroes of the Holocaust. Many of their stories have been hidden in the pages of history and deserve to be told. Pictures, newspaper clippings, and links to external articles relating to a particular episode will be available on our website. Thanks again for listening. I'm John Rodriguez, and until we meet again, this has been Hidden History and Odyssey Through Time.